All right. So we're making good progress. We're now on point three, and point three is really cool because it's all about taking adverse conditions onto the path. So, one of the things I've always had a genuine and sincere appreciation for Lojong about is the fact that Lojong is like, look, samsara is very difficult, and we're going to teach you how to take all of the bad situations and understand them to be bad, but flip them so that they become beneficial for each of us. And that's something that's quite beautiful. And it all happens in our mind. So it's something that we can control. We can control our outlook, and we certainly cannot control the world around us. And that's something that each of us have to sort of accept. But we can definitely control our outlook. So we're going to be talking about that point today. And then, as always, cultivate pure motivation. And this is just the wish that, you know, as a result of our Dharma practice, may all living beings benefit, right? And if we continue to cultivate that sincere wish, our selfishness will slowly be stripped away, which is a great way to remove our suffering. Everybody here already knows about the activities, so we don't need to spend a lot of time on that. This is the third point, taking adverse conditions onto the path of enlightenment. And then these are all of the subpoints of point three. So last week we started on banish all blames to the single source, which is basically saying like, look, no matter what happens in the world, when I suffer, there's a direct correlation to the thought of me, right? So if suffering arises, then the thought of me is there along with that suffering. So what banish all blames to the single source is this identification of the real root cause of suffering, which is the selfish thought. So I'm just kind of reviewing this point with you guys. I know some of you didn't make it last week. The bottom line is banish all blames to the single source is not necessarily about self mortification or self loathing or thinking, oh, I'm the worst ever. It's not that. It's more like, oh, my boss said something today. And I had a certain feeling when he said that now, and I became angry and arrogant. And inside I wanted to, yell at him and curse him out. Now, a non dharmic person would be like, the world is always giving me difficulty and my boss is a jerk. But a person with mind training experience who's actually practiced this, right, would be like, oh, that's my self-cherishing. That's my self-grasping, right? Because my boss said the same thing to my peer, and my peer was totally cool with it. And he kind of took it and made it a productive conversation, right? But then when it happened to me, I wanted to throw a refrigerator at him, right? So it's like Lojong empowers us to what it really is a very, very skilled way to practice accepting the world, to accepting the unfolding experience in front of us, instead of being blown around by what I want and what I don't want. Because when we're blown around by what we want and what we don't want, we just suffer because whatever you want is impermanent. So if you get what you want, which by the way is not always guaranteed, it's only going to be there for a second or for a few weeks or for a few months or whatever. It's going to dissolve because pretty much all phenomena arise, persist, and then dissolve, right? We all know that. That's impermanence. So for that reason, we want to take Lojong and use it as a healing a healing outlook on the world that allows us to convert every situation into a productive, valuable situation. No matter how bad it might seem, we can take the situation and make it beneficial. Okay. And that's what this banish all blames to a single source is about is whenever we have issues, if we can be fearless, courageous, and honest and look right at ourselves, we will see the glaring eye right there. That egoistic me that wants what we want and is not, for some reason, is not okay with what's arising. Okay. So whatever befalls you without blaming others, think this is due to my own self grasping, right? Think of it this way. A few weeks ago, we did a little exercise where I said, take it in. take a situation that you're dealing with and then project it onto a movie as if you have actors in a movie. And I think most of the people in the meeting said, that's really interesting because I went from being really emotional to being freed from the emotion when I put it up on the movie. Right. And so this is sort of a way to say, look, I know that when I suffer, it's because I'm grasping at a self that doesn't really exist. So in order to free myself from my suffering, I'm going to say everything that causes me to be unhappy, dissatisfied, the five poisons are anger, attachment, delusion, jealousy, and pride. So anything I experience that evokes those negative emotions, self-grasping is the culprit. Now remember, self-grasping is a thought, right? Self-grasping is a thought. So we're not saying, oh, this thing here called my body, we're not saying I'm horrible, right? We're not saying that. We're just saying the thought, the selfish thinking, and the belief that there's actually an independent self. That's the culprit. Because if you go through your whole body piece by piece to look for a self, you won't find it. It's nowhere to be found. So it's just self is a mental projection. And that's kind of what we're coming to the conclusion like, okay, this mental projection of me being important and me existing independently causes all my issues. Okay. So that's banish all blames to a single source. So if you let go of your expectations in life, nothing can stick to you. So if you let go of the selfish wishes, the wants, the desires, and you rest in the freedom of letting go, you're going to have nothing but contentment. And this point kind of gives us permission to do that in a skillful way. So we just need to understand clearly that our selfish thinking, not the outside world, magnifies our suffering and makes life unbearable. Right. So we're trying, so this banish all blames to a single source is saying the thought of me, my, and I causes all my suffering, and I have to learn how to let go of that thought. You need to see it, and then you need to learn how to let go of it. So this is Bardor Tulku on the right. By the way, he passed away 3 weeks ago. So please cultivate the wish that he finds peace in his journey as he moves to the next rebirth. So he said that the two ways we typically respond to things is, I don't like this and why me? Those are the common responses. Okay. So we need to understand why things happen to us. There's never been a self. Okay. It's a mental projection and we project it onto the body and the mind. And then we believe that it actually exists independently of our thinking. And so, as you guys know, Buddhism believes in reincarnation, life after life. And what the Lojong masters say is that although there's never been a self, I've fixated on it since timeless beginning. Since the beginning of time, which we say is actually beginningless, I've fixated on this me, even at the cost of all other living beings. I've done everything to benefit myself, regardless of how it harmed others. And that's what is actually causing the current suffering that I'm experiencing is that habitual pattern. So when we act selfishly, that produces negative karma. Yeah. So essentially it's coming back to this reality that all the selfish habituation that I've created has caused me to accumulate a lot of negative karma. And then whatever arises, that whatever suffering arises, whether it's sickness or sadness or loneliness, it's a result, right? It's a result of a previous effect. So that's so on one hand, when we banish all blames to a single source, we're sort of acknowledging that I did something before that's causing this to come up. But then on the other hand, we can also say that my predisposition with my own importance is what disables me from just letting go. Right. So if you get sick and you're not real preoccupied with yourself, you're just going to say, okay, I'm sick, whatever. Well, I'm going to let it be. I'm going to accept it. Right. But if you have a real obsession with me, you're going to freak out. So we just need to understand the role that the self-cherishing plays. Okay. Any questions so far?
I have a question. So I know like the self-grasping, we could look at it from an evolutionary kind of standpoint that, we evolved to have this idea that we need to protect ourselves.
Mm.
And for the most part in today's world, we're not really in survival situations. So it makes sense to that self-grasping actually hurts us.
Yeah.
But in the rare case that we are in a survival situation, I'm not sure that I would not protect myself, you know?
Yeah. And I think you should, right? So these, and I always tell people this, don't take these things literally if, like the whole like banish all blames to a single source. Like if you're hanging out with somebody and they start punching you in the face, I mean, you don't have to, it's a choice it's a choice what you do next. If somebody does that to me, I don't think I'm going to say banish all blames to a single source. Okay. I don't think I'm there yet. I think what I would do is most likely, who knows what I would do? That's unimportant. Protect yourself, right? So if somebody physically attacks you, protect yourself, get out of there. Don't sit and enjoy that kind of treatment. But when your friend says, how much were those pants? Right? Or somebody's like, "Oh, you look like you put on a few pounds since the pandemic starts," right? When like the most common daily experiences that most of us are probably dealing with, when those things happen, and then you get mad about it, right?
Mhm.
Or you feel threatened, or you feel hurt, or you feel insecure, whatever these all we have all kinds of emotions that happen millions of times per day, probably, it seems like. When those things arise, look at that. Try to look at that self-grasping. And by the way, there's two things in Buddhism. There's self-grasping, which is not understanding the emptiness of the self. Okay. So self-grasping is thinking there's a self that exists independently. If we think back to what we learned in emptiness, everything arises in dependence upon CPM, right? Causes and conditions. So the mom and the dad, the sperm and the egg, caused this thing to arise, right? So causes and conditions, parts. So the head, the eyes, nose, ears, all the parts of a body. So causes and conditions, parts, and then the mind that conceives and labels it. So really, there's no phenomena that exists without a conceptual label, because otherwise we wouldn't even be able to sit here and have this class, right? I wouldn't be able to use concepts to try to teach something. So this self is a conceptual label. So self grasping is thinking that there's actually a me that exists independent of those things that I just mentioned. There is no person that exists that didn't come from a sperm and an egg, right?
Mhm. Right.
So we're almost like a string of dominoes, and the current string we're on looks like this. But at one point, if you go way back to the beginning of the dominoes, it was a sperm. So there were several years ago when I was on a plane. I'm trying, what year was that? I don't know what year it was. It might have been 016 or 017. I think I was going to Cali on business, and I was reading and studying a lot. And for some reason, I just looked up at the plane and I was towards the back, and I just saw like all these sperms. And I was like, we were all sperms once, and we take all this stuff we do real seriously. But at one point, we were just this liquid substance. And then, over time, we grew and changed, expanded. And then at the end, we start to contrast, right? Or contract, rather. So what we are is not what we think we are. And we're grasping this self. But if you really think that I or me exists, then because, think about it, right? You go second by second through your whole life. Which second are you? You can't really say, right? You can't say, well, I'm still the sperm. I know I look funny. I did my hair today, but I'm still that sperm. Or, okay, maybe you don't think that. Are you still the toddler? Are you falling down all over your house? No, of course not. So then are you the 20-year-old? Are you which self are you? And then you'll say, well, I'm I'm not this firm, right? Look at me, I'm a human. But there's a constant change, right? We're changing every I think Buddhism says there's 50 subseconds per finger snap or some number like that. So if you think about how time works, right? If this represents 50 subseconds, then you multiply that by your whole life. Which subsecond are you? And then you come to the conclusion that me or my or I it's a conceptual label. Okay. So that self grasping is what we need to understand. It's thinking there's something here that doesn't actually exist outside of our mental projection. Okay. Now, self cherishing is easy to understand. Self grasping is a little bit complicated. Self cherishing is just me, me, me. I want what I want. And the other 7 point something billion people, I don't think about them. They're not important to me. It's all about me. And unfortunately, most of us have a fairly pronounced case of self grasping because we're modern people. I think modernity encourages selfishness. It's the age of the selfie, right? And then so modernity, as well as we're in a very capitalistic society. So most of us have been brainwashed from age, whatever, basically as soon as we could communicate, we've been brainwashed to believe in the pursuit of excellence, the pursuit of wealth, the pursuit of accumulation. So it's self-grasping and self-cherishing, and banish all blames to the single source is really saying, let's say I get sick, right? Take my sickness and put it on top of these negative outlooks, right? Does that make sense? You kind of asked a question and then I tried to address it holistically. Definitely do not, if, like just reiterating, if somebody attacks you, I mean, I think we should try to be safe. Okay.
Mhm. That makes
Now,
sense. Yeah.
yeah. Now the Buddhism, the mindset of Buddhism is a lot different than the mindset of non-Buddhists. For example, if somebody breaks in my home, do I do I shoot them or do I not shoot them? Right. And that becomes a whole ethical discussion. The Buddhists would say, no, you don't shoot them. But then if you're not alone, then it becomes, okay, well, what about my family? They're innocent. Theoretically, the person that broke in is not innocent. Those are just concepts. But so it becomes the Buddhist mentality about protecting yourself is probably a lot different than the mentality of our country countrymen and women,
Mhm.
right? So we'll save that for a different day because that could open a very large ball of worms. So
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. That's a good discussion.
cool. So to understand it's my selfishness that causes not only that caused this to arise, because I planted the karmic seed at some point to cause the current moment of suffering to arise, but also when it arises, my current mindset is I'm oppositional to accepting what's unfolding, right? So we have aversion. So this is very important. Our aversion is coming off of our selfishness. We want what we want. And so since we want what we want, if something other than that comes up, we're averse to it. We want to push it away. Does everybody understand that aversion? Let me ask you this. If you didn't have any aversion, if everything that arose you accepted, then what would your quality of life be like? What do you guys think? Just imagine, take your biggest fear, your biggest concern, and just imagine that you're totally okay with it. What do you think your life would be like?
Just the thought of that kind of blows my mind a little bit. I think it'd be a lot more peaceful.
Yeah. And these opinions that we create, right? About what we want and what we don't want, they're not coming from the outside, are they?
No, but I guess they could be influenced by other people. So
Oh, they're totally influenced for sure. But the thoughts going on in our mind right now, like if somebody says something to us, right? That they don't really have control over our brain wiring. We're the ones that really decide how we want our interior life to be, you know? And one of the things that's sad about America and about most countries nowadays is that we spend all this time working out and going to the gym. And then 99.9% of the people don't do anything for their own mind. There's not a lot of investment in mental health. And I would ask you, if you think about the importance of physical health and the importance of mental health, if your mind goes wrong and you're in really good shape, so let's say you become delusional or psychopathic, right? Mentally, but you're in great shape and your body's beautiful. How good is your life going to be? You're not even going to know where you are, right? Because you have a mental illness. But then if you flip that and you say, well, okay, so what about if my body declines for one reason or another and I end up wheelchair bound and I can't do anything and I'm unattractive or whatever, but my mind is pristine and peaceful and full of love and wisdom, then how good will your life be? Right? It's, we can be very, very happy without any suffering. There was a Tibetan teacher that I was listening to one of his books, and he said his master back in Tibet had a disease of the spine, so he couldn't stand up straight. And everywhere he went, he was bent over, holding his cane. And I don't know exactly like what his degree was, like how bad his range of motion was, but his master was completely, he had this spinal disease. And apparently he was incredibly advanced in his practice. And so every moment that he lived was full of pure bliss. And now when you think about that, most Americans wouldn't think like, oh, this person can be completely full of disease and be full of peace, like no suffering. It's really quite possible actually. So, okay. So what we're trying to do now is we're taking all of our suffering and we're piling it on top of our ego. Like a rugby scrum, right? So it's like we got all this stuff that we're dealing with, right? Life isn't going our way, or just the little things are on our nerves or whatever. We're going to take those and we're going to say, look, join my army in the fight against me. And remember, we're not self-loathing. I'm not saying hate yourself. Please do not misunderstand and misconstrue the point of this teaching. The point is, we want to pile this stuff on top of the miserable thought of me, 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 because it is that thought that causes all of our suffering and those around us, quite honestly. Okay. So that's what banish all blames to a single source is. So if you have any trouble understanding what this means, just kind of think of that rugby scrum where they're all piling on and say, I want to take life situations. I get sick. I'm going to take that sickness and I'm going to pile it on top of the self-cherishing me, right? I lose my job. I get divorced. One of my friends dies. I get sick, whatever it is, you can flip it and say, this is a great opportunity to start to dissolve my selfish mind and accept the circumstances, because I guarantee you, if you could accept everything that arises, you're going to grow and you're going to become a much more peaceful person. Make sense? Questions or comments? Another point from the same sub bullet is, if there's a self recognition of others arises, and on this division into self and others, grasping and anger arise. And in relation to these two emotions, all calamities come into being. So that simple dualistic mind frame of me and them causes so much suffering, right? Because as soon as there's a self, there's others. And then you put them into different categories. And then on those different categories, there starts to be this tension and this confrontation. So the self-cherishing and thinking there's actually a separate self is is its own pandemic. I mean, it's really a toxic outlook on the world, but yet most of us modern people, this is our outlook, and it's responsible for a lot of our suffering. So if there was no self and other, remember last week I was talking about, can you guys imagine your neighbor comes over, they're knocking on the door. I baked you fresh chocolate chip cookies and I washed your car. I used the wax you like. Imagine if all your neighbors were doing this because there was no selfishness and we all lived for the collective whole. Can you guys imagine that kind of a life, that kind of a world? Do you think there'd be mass shootings on the TV every day? No, right? So this self is a disease. I'm sorry, the thought of a self is a disease. Doesn't mean we need to hate this contraption, whatever this thing is, right? Doesn't mean we need to have self-loathing, but we need to understand this. The thought of me is a toxic infection that is every time you see a shooting, like a mass shooting, and if you analyze that shooting and start to think about it, a lot of these people do have mental health issues because you could argue that they wouldn't do that without a mental health issue. But there's also this thing where a lot of these people, like if you look into their backgrounds, they're outcasted, right? So instead of being given love, a lot of these people are sort of castigated, tormented, and put on the fray. They're pushed out on the fray and made to be felt to feel as though they're less than or they're not loved and they're not. And by the way, I'm not in any way justifying that action because it's horrible through and through. The point is, it's that self and other duality that causes all of the world's suffering, right? Any questions? So this is one of my favorites. You know what I like about what you guys will what you guys actually before you read this, what you guys will learn over time as you study Buddhism, you'll learn that there are these different analogies and these different phrases that the masters use. And sometimes you just hear the right thing differently, right? One teacher explains it this way, and then you hear it differently from somebody else, and it all just clicks. You know, it's just like, wow, that makes so much sense. This is one of those things for me. When I first was studying this, I was just like, this makes so much sense. So to cherish, look at, and protect this discolored human corpse, a lump of pus and blood and sack of mucus, is like carrying a bag of thorns on your back while naked. Happiness would result if you just let go, but instead you believe pursuing self-interest will bring happiness, and you thus sink ever deeper into suffering as though you craved it. This is beautiful for a multitude of reasons. First of all, the master is saying like, look, you think you spent all this time trying to beautify your body, but what it really is a lump of pus and blood and a sack of mucus. This is true, by the way. If you look inside of the human body, you're not going to be real intoxicated with what you find. This is not a beautiful situation going on inside of all this. Okay. You got pus, blood, feces, oil, sweat. What else? I mean, there's a whole range of these substances, and the Buddha taught, because remember in the early days, you had monks and nuns that were following the Buddha, monastics, right? The Buddha taught the way to overcome desire for the opposite or same sex that you have desire for is to visualize what is actually going on over there, right? So we think, oh my God, he's so handsome or she's so beautiful. We think that, right? Okay, well, let's do this. Let's pretend that she didn't bathe for 2 weeks, hasn't brushed her teeth, all of the things that people think should be present in somebody are not there, right? What would that person still be attractive? Go smell their armpits. Okay. And then what about all the stuff inside of them? Yeah, I feel differently now. Right. So the monks and the nuns would do these meditative contemplations, and they would use these to let go of all their desire, you know, because it's like you think somebody's really beautiful, and then you like, when you first meet somebody and you're dating. Well, if you're really obsessed with them, think about them taking a deuce. Just visualize them. Visualize the process of them taking a deuce. And then I don't think you're going to have so much obsession, right? So that, I mean, that's what the Buddha taught. He taught like, be real. Shantideva was another teacher, and he would teach that we're so delusional. We get attracted to somebody's perfume or cologne, right? We're like, oh, they smell so good. Okay. So let me get this straight. You're attracted to him or her because of their cologne. And the reason they're using cologne is because their fundamental natures, they don't smell good. If they go for 2 weeks without a shower or cologne, it's absolutely disgusting, right? But yet you're associating them with the cologne. We're literally delusional. Like we're like delusional, and we never realized it. But that's what Buddhism is trying to cut through. They're trying to show us the truth so that we're not intoxicated anymore, right? So again, this paragraph is rich. It's very full of meaning. To cherish, look at, and protect this discolored human corpse, a lump of pus and blood, and a sack of mucus. We're trying to protect this as though it's the most important thing that ever existed. Notice he's calling it a corpse. All we are is a corpse in waiting. This Our ticket is going to get punched at some point, right? I mean, we all know that. We are not permanent beings. We're going to pass away. Okay. So to be super, super attached to this body and this life, you're already losing because, we're going to die. And that's why impermanence is a big point of Buddhist study, death and impermanence, just contemplating that everything's impermanent and everything arises and falls. So, and then he goes on to say, basically craving what we want is like carrying around a bag of thorns on your back. So just imagine your back, right? The skin on your back and a heavy backpack that's made out of thorns. Maybe you're carrying 50 pounds in that backpack, and the pressure of those thorns digging into your skin. If your friends saw you, they'd be like, dude, you're bleeding. Let's take your backpack off. Be like, no, no, no. It's making me happy. It's making me so happy. No, it's not making you happy. You're bleeding. Please take off the backpack. This is what we do in life. So we create these buckets. This is what I want. This is what I don't want. And anything that doesn't go exactly according to my plan, I'm going to be totally depressed, mad, angry, and sad and lonely. Well, okay. So there's something wrong with that, because what you want is so small and microscopic compared to the infinitude of things that are going to happen. You don't have a chance for being happy. Now, what about if we flip that and say, instead of me being addicted and obsessed with what I want, I open my heart. I open, and accept whatever arises. Then instead of being microscopically obsessed with one outcome, you're happy with all outcomes. Can you guys see the difference? On one hand, there's a tiny little period dot that's like very, very microscopic, like a piece of pen. You put a period on a piece of paper, it's very tiny. Compare that to the whole of existence, right? And that period being what we want. I want this. I want this right here. I want this small thing. This must happen. Okay. Well, okay, that's fine. But this infinity is what's going to happen. So we have to learn that in order for us to have contentment, if we learn how to accept whatever comes, good or bad, if we learn how to accept whatever comes and understand that it's our mind that is putting things in buckets, this is the good bucket, this is the bad bucket, and we just completely let go and allow life to unfold and continue to open ourselves up and accept it, we are going to find peace. Does that make sense for everybody? I've been talking too much. I'd love to hear feedback and questions.
You really could turn all of this talk into an amazing erotic novel. It's such sexy talk. Since I made a joke, I'll at least say something. Do we really have to destroy romance in order to mm, avoid the attachment, the self? I feel like there's got to be a middle road here where I don't have to destroy all that is classically romantic in order to fight urges.
So it's a great question. And the short answer is you don't have to do anything. That's the cool thing is like, this isn't like the fire and brimstone club, right? That some of us probably on some level growing up in this country have at least, experienced shades of other religions that are really like, do this or die a fiery death, right? This is not that. So no, you definitely do not have to destroy romance. And I presume you're talking about relational romance or like love and so forth, right? Okay.
Yep,
So
that's the angle. That's the angle that I'm coming from.
cool. Yeah. So you definitely don't have to do that. However,
Don't we apply this to? I mean, if we take it not just to relationship romance, if we put romantic in quote and use it in the classical sense, don't I do the same thing with a piece of artwork then, where I go, oh, this art is so beautiful, I'm attracted to this piece of artwork, but instead let me just view it as layers of paint on a canvas and deconstruct it in a way that is non-romantic. One could destroy everything that was romantic or beautiful in a sense by deconstructing it and thinking of it in its most icky parts.
yeah. So this could be because my answer might have something to do with the fact that I'm not a huge lover of art, but I am a huge lover of beauty. So I spend a lot of time, outside looking at the sky and just being sort of amazed at the sheer capacity of our universe to create things that it creates. Okay. So I'm not suggesting that we can't see the beauty in things, but kind of going back to what I was talking about before with the whole, like the way the Buddha taught monastics about attachment is you can do whatever you want, but if you want wisdom, if you want to live in reality, right, then it will help you to understand that, desirous, obsessive attachment to anything, whether it's art or people. Better example is people because we have a biological programming that causes us to get really, really high when we meet somebody. And I mean higher than any drug could make us. I mean, I think most of us probably understand this. And that high is very short lived. Okay. So I've been in the same relationship for 20, longer than 20 years. And I can tell you that everything changes. So it's like that thing that we're addicted to in the beginning. It is changing. It's a impermanent, there's no stasis. It's an impermanent thing. Okay. So when we start to talk about like, hey, do I have to destroy everything that's romantic? Absolutely not. You don't have to do anything, but there's a big but. But the suffering that we experience is usually directly correlated with our attachment to something. When we're attached to something we want, right? Could be, I want to work in a certain job. I want to be with a certain type of a person. I want to live in a certain neighborhood. I want this to happen. I want that to happen. When that doesn't happen, right? Then what happens? We suffer. Or when that does happen, and then we're like, well, now that I have it, now I'm scared I'm going to lose it. I got the house I want. Now I'm terrified I'm going to lose the house. And then you get stressed out about your job. And then you get worried about, well, what if I lose my house? And what are all these people going to think? What are my friends and family going to say about me? So it's like this house of cards that's built on desire and aversion, right? So feel free to do whatever it is that you would like to do. That's the cool thing, is you have freedom, but be real and honest about the implications of the decisions that we make. So the more desire and attachment we have for, especially for another person, the clock's ticking on when we're going to be destroyed emotionally. Because that person is going to die at some point, or we are, and we're going to have to separate, right? So what Buddhism tries to do, what the Buddha tried to do, is to heal our suffering. So all of these things are taught because they want us not to suffer. It's not the other way around. They're not trying to take stuff away from us. They're trying to heal us, right? Does that answer the question, David, or no?
It gives me stuff to chew on.
Well, and we're also not trying to create aversion, right? Because that's just as bad as attachment. So
Absolutely.
when it comes to relationships, I don't know if the goal is somewhere in the middle where you appreciate someone but accept that you're going to lose them at some point or something like that.
Yeah. So there is something called non-attached love, right? And it becomes almost more like compassion than love. It's like this wish for another person to have happiness and peace, right? And it's less about what do I want out of this, right?
Hmm.
So that's really the underlying delimiting factor here is selfish desire. So if you think somebody's really beautiful, right, and you're really obsessed, that is your selfishness. So what we're trying to do, and it's our selfishness that causes us to suffer. Because remember, any thought, speech, or action that we do with the selfish mind leads to suffering invariably. It's the law of karma. So what we're trying to do is, instead of having this selfish preoccupation with what I want and what I think about this person, is you could flip the script and you could say, let me be a servant for them. Yes, they're beautiful. I already know how I feel about them, but let me, instead of perpetuating my own desirous attachment, which is based on selfishness, how about I perpetuate love and compassion in an organic way to help them? What can I do to make them happy? What can I do to teach them the wisdom of the Dharma? What could I do to make them healthier, et cetera, this type of thinking. So instead of being worried about my own obsessive desire, I convert it into love and compassion.
That makes sense. So it's not like a lot of times obsessive love is almost about like owning that person or how does that person make you feel?
Yes.
What does that person do for you? So if you look more as what you can do for them, then yeah, that kind of flips.
Yeah. And then it kind of takes care of the desire in its own way. And keep in mind, the hard thing about this is that when we feel that, that kind of lustful connection with somebody where it's like the whole world melts away and there's just you and that person. Now you're dealing with chemicals in the brain and it's very, very intoxicating. So in a way, what I tell you is almost irrelevant because those chemicals are stronger than this teaching could ever be. But as a rule of thumb, you can never be you can never be going the wrong direction if you're cultivating love and compassion and trying to let go of attachment, desire, anger, all these negative things that are really the causes of our suffering, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And again, just to sum up this slide, it's about seeing the true enemy, which is our selfish mind. The true enemy is wanting what we want. That's the true enemy, is this desire for just desire for the sake of desire. And the challenge is the way we've been brought up is so counterintuitive to this. So when I teach these classes, I expect people to be like, what? Dude, what are you saying to me right now? What are you telling me? Because this is the antithesis of what we were all taught for the last 30, 40 years of our lives. So of course I expect you guys to be a little bit discombobulated when you try to digest this. But I'll tell you, there's a wonderful author that I read a book. His name is Martin Seligman. He's a PhD. I think it's Selegman. He's the kind of like the godfather of it's called positive psychology. Okay. He wrote a book called Learned Optimism. And in the end of that book, and by the way, this book came out in the 90s, so it's a little older, but he had a mountain of data because he's actually a research psychologist. So he's a PhD that does deep, deep research on these big research projects. And in the end of the book, he started to talk about rising rates of depression. And he was trying to ascertain what's the cause of this depression. Now, when he wrote this book, this was sort of like pre-digital explosion. Okay. Nobody had cell phones back in the 90s unless you were like sort of wealthy. Okay. Especially not the early 90s. But what he said was we are sort of prisoners of potential, meaning that if you go back 100 years, the typical human had things that he or she had to do to survive, and they accepted their role. But then all of a sudden, infinite potential came to the scene, and each one of us could get anything we want, right? And essentially what this has done is it's the marketing companies. By the way, I've been in sales and marketing my whole career, so I'm probably partly responsible. But the marketing and the sales organizations have learned how to sell stuff to us that we don't need. But then they took it a step further and they've learned how to make us addicted to the idea of getting that BMW or getting that house or getting that ring or that watch or whatever. And so he sort of said that is responsible for the increasing rates of depression. So I found that to be interesting. And I could, if anybody's curious about the specifics that he shares, I could send it over if anybody wants it. So, so if you view your own self as the enemy, no matter what, no matter what negative situation arises, you can look at it as the army that's on your side, like your compatriots in the war against the selfishness. Okay. So that's what this is doing. So banishing all blames to a single source is something bad comes up that you don't like. Okay. And you flip the script and you say, you know what? I'll give you guys an example. Most of us have a boss or somebody that we have to deal with. Some humans. Does everybody here have to deal with humans? All right. So there's a human that you deal with and you have some kind of problem, right? And maybe you get irritated or you get mad or you get hurt. When those negative emotions come up, flip the script and say, this is the best thing that could ever happen because this is a chance for me to destroy the thought of me, me, me. Because if you do it once, then you can do it twice, then you can do it 3 times. And if you continue to allow yourself to kind of burn away the thought of me, 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 by allowing life's natural occurrences, which they're a myriad of infinite occurrences that are going to come up for all of us that we don't particularly love, right? If we allow those things to convert us to be converted into positive things, then essentially there's not going to be anything that can create imbalance in us. We'll become like a mountain because instead of all these people being potential threats to our happiness, they literally all become our fellow warriors that have a shared purpose. And that shared purpose is let me destroy the self-cherishing mind that causes all suffering. Right. So you can start to play with this idea like, oh, this is great. here comes the army to help me against the enemy, because the enemy is a self-cherishing thought. So your boss says something that pisses you off, or your neighbor parks in front of your parking spot again, or your brother or sister irritates you at family dinner, or whatever. I don't know what you guys are dealing with. I wish I did, because I can give you examples, but anybody have an example of a challenge they're dealing with? Please, not everybody at once. Everybody's a Buddha?
Just as of this week, I didn't know how to break it to you.
That's great, man. Congrats.
I've got a task at work. A sales department is supposed to communicate to me, and we have disagreement over how that communication should occur. And I want it to be one way, they want it to be another way. And both sides, me and the other side, are both being a little petty about some little details involved. Like, I think you should have to create this file. No, I think you should right click and then click new, 2 clicks. And I'm going, no, you should do it. And they're going, well, I think you should do it. And it's frustrating.
Yeah.
Is this an okay example to work from?
Yeah, I think it's a good example. Is there anything more irritating than right clicking at work? Any other deeper stuff at work that you get irritated about? Like stuff that really makes you think, you know what? I'm going to go build my own thing. Screw these guys.
I kind of am building my own thing at work. So I'm lucky like that. I don't know, sure, sometimes I suppose.
I mean, I think if one wanted to utilize this technique, right, of banishing all blames to a single source, what one could do is, if they have a, you know, challenging situation at work where there's tension and there's some opposition between different parties, one could say that this,
Here's tension right here. These guys make me want to throw them in the dumpster. I don't think that works. I don't think that'll work as an example.
no, it will. If they really make you want to throw them in the dumpster.
No, they don't really do that. I can't have that being put out in the universe.
Okay.
I don't want that karma.
Okay. You said it, not me.
I know. It was a joke. I'm sorry. No more jokes.
No, it's all good. So back to the work thing, right? So one could very easily say, look, this department is making me irritable, because this really should be their responsibility, right? Because we all do that. This should be their responsibility. Their sales, they're the one that did such and such. They should do this before it gets over to onboarding or training. What one could do is one could say, I'm feeling irritation. I'm feeling anger arising. And this is my self-cherishing. This is my own desire for what I want to happen in the world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recruit those people that are against me, hypothetically against me. I'm going to recruit them as part of my army, and we're all going to pile on to the rugby pile to destroy my own selfishness. So I'm going to do what they want, and I'm going to do it in order to change, to hammer away at my own ego so I can get the armor, because ego's got a giant armor, right? It's like a fully 5-layered knight with, that real enforced steel the knights would wear. It's got 5 layers of steel. So we have to pop away at the ego with a hammer and a chisel in order to get it to come down. And so what I'm going to do is, that department that's making me mad, I'm going to join their team in the fight against the selfish mind that is inside of me. And so I'm going to do what they want, and I'm going to do it very intentionally to burn away my selfishness. Does that make sense?
Yes, that sounds very challenging. That's very challenging. I'm thinking of the situations, and I'm frustrated with the idea because I'm thinking I don't want them to get their way.
Yeah.
Definitely feeling selfish right now. Oh, you're all judging me. I see the looks. All of you just looking at me like, oh, he's a big selfish jerk.
No, I think we're all saying that was me last Thursday, or that was me yesterday, or that was me this morning, right? Everybody, this is literally all of it.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
It's just,
I feel
it's just that you're the one that had the courage to share it.
right. I had courage, everybody. I'm a courageous, selfish jerk.
Thursday morning, I mean, I'll just put, I'm not shy, guys. And I never try to play a role of being like advanced, because I don't really think of myself as advanced spiritually. Thursday, now Monday, I had the vaccine. And then even now, I'm still like, my body's kind of off. So you guys know, like when your body's really off after being sick, you're kind of cranky. So, so Thursday, I show up to this meeting, and this other department starts, kind of like what you're saying, David. This other department starts saying things that I was not okay with at all. So, so inside of me, a very large forest fire ensued, and I was so mad, and I didn't use this. Look, the truth is, we're not always going to be able to use the Dharma. We should try to always use it because it's here for us. And the more we habituate it, the less we suffer. When I look back at that moment, what happened with me was I felt very unappreciated by the other people on the team. And I felt like they had a complete lack of contextual awareness and perspective on the big picture of what matters, right? And I became very, very irritable and mad. I don't think, I suppose to a degree I grew because I didn't lash out at anybody. I just hit mute. I'm trying to learn how to hit mute because I'm too vocal sometimes. I just hit mute, and then by the end of the call, I think they all started telling me I'm doing a great job. And I was like, yeah, now you're saying this to try to dig yourself out of a hole. But the point is, right? When I do the Monday morning quarterback and I look back and I analyze the situation, if I would have just said, let me recruit this army to destroy the selfishness inside me, I would have been totally happy. I would have been totally happy. The problem is our egos have this habitual stronghold on us, and it's not easy to let go. So the reason I put my experience out there is I want everybody to understand that this is a process, and sometimes you can use it and sometimes you forget. But if you can employ this, it will, I mean, it works like, it works 100%. It's just that the willingness for us to use it is the wild card. Okay. Anybody else have a bout with bravery where they want to share something? Yeah. You guys are too quiet. All right. What time is it? 11:05. Maybe I'll do one more. All right. So this next sub bullet is called toward all beings contemplate their kindness. And I used a different Lojong text as an example. So there's this Lojong text called Training the Mind in 8 verses, and it was by Langri Thangpa. And he said, all sentient beings are the creators of all enlightened beings. And I recognize that. That's why we should consider everybody else as more important than ourselves. Because of that, no matter who you're dealing with, no matter who you're, no matter where you go, you will consider yourself of lesser importance than they, because they are the creators of all enlightened beings. Okay, here's another way we could use this. So the example David gave and the example I gave, looking back to my situation at work, I mean, I was really pissed. I was enraged when I was in this meeting. And I've noticed something in myself, in my personal life. I am I'm pretty easygoing. I'm just kind of chill. My wife makes all the decisions. Sure, honey. Yeah. that sounds good. Let's do it. I don't really try to control what goes on in the house in terms of building new decks or buying cars or whatever happens. I just kind of say, sure, that sounds great. Okay. Because I just don't really care. I'm fine with it, whatever. Right. At work, eh, not so much. At work, the Marine is still showing up every morning, loading up his weapon, and he's ready for war. And it's the strangest thing because, like, I show up and literally, I just, I get my testosterone levels increased by like 6,000%. So when I look back at that situation on Thursday, right here, this is it. Okay. So what Langry Thankba is saying is that that sentient beings are are our teachers. They are the ones that can help us purify our selfishness. Because if it weren't for sentient beings, you could go sit in a cave and you could become enlightened. But then the minute you come out of the cave after a 1 year meditation retreat and somebody cuts you off on the road, you're looking for your, what's that thing you use to change a tire? The, whatever, you're looking for your metal pipe to throw at them because they cut you off. And you were in the cave for 1 year meditating, and then you come out and you have road rage and you want to road rage and you want to fight everybody. So this is incredibly important because what the masters tell us is that sentient beings, when they give us trouble, they're teaching us about our own inadequacies. They're teaching us about our selfishness. Because if they give us trouble and we just say, no biggie, then we're becoming enlightened. So if somebody says words to us like, oh, Jason, looks like you gained 10 pounds because of the pandemic. You've been eating more brownies. If I get really mad, that means I haven't learned how to look at them as my teacher. But if I look at it as though they're talking about a corpse. So like instead of thinking that they're talking about me, if I think like, oh, they're talking about some guy who died 20 years ago, I won't even care, right? So there are these techniques where you can look at every living being as a creator of Buddhas. And when I say they create Buddhas, which is what he's just saying that they're the ones that allow you to have compassion. When somebody gives you trouble at work and they want you to right click, you can convert that into an opportunity to allow yourself to become enlightened. Because we can't become enlightened if we're hung up on what we want. Our selfishness is really the only thing about blocking contentment. There's nothing else. There's no outside obstructors to our contentment. Not our job, not our spouse, not our boyfriend and girlfriend, not our family, not our neighbor, not the orange previous president. I won't say any names. As wonderful as he still was not able to block our contentment because contentment comes from the inside, not from the outside. Make sense, everybody? Questions, comments?
I love the quote. For me, when I first heard of the thought of thinking of yourself as lower than everybody, I thought that would be very difficult for me to do. But this definitely puts it in a different perspective. And I think it's going to be a little bit more easy for me to do that after seeing this. So I kind of want to make this my screensaver.
Please do. That would make me very happy. I mean, think about how beautiful a friend who, anybody have a friend who, when you talk to them, they talk incessantly about themselves? Anybody ever had a friend like that? And then when you need some support and you try to tell them about your situation, they start talking about themselves. But wait, I need you. And then they start talking about themselves. Anybody ever had a friend like that? I'm sure you guys have, right? How do they make you feel? Isn't that, I mean, that's everything that's wrong with the world, right? And I'm not saying that to be, I'm not saying that to criticize any particular person. I'm just saying it's the thought. It's the selfish thought that causes all suffering in the world. Now, contrast that. Has anybody ever had a friend who is just wide open for you, right? Anybody ever had that kind of friend or a family member or whatever? Somebody who's always there for you? Now imagine if you could be that for everybody. It's pretty it's pretty amazing, right? And then you don't suffer. You stop suffering because you look at yourself as a servant to all beings. And then voila, you're not mad at your peers anymore at work like I was. You're not, you don't really have a lot of expectations. You just look at yourself as a beautiful servant. And that's the real the person who can see themselves as lower than all living beings is actually the real warrior, because it's really easy to have an ego. It's we all have a PhD in selfishness. I mean, it's just natural. I mean, we actually all have 5 PhDs from every Ivy League school on selfishness. Harvard, Yale, Williams. What are the other, MIT maybe, if you want to be technical. We have PhDs in selfishness from every accredited university. So it's really easy to see yourself as superior to other living beings, but to see yourself as lower than them and to bow down and prostrate to everybody, that actually takes a lot of courage and a lot of, that you really have to transform to be able to do that, right? Thanks for the comment, Thomas. Anybody else? Any comments before we take a quick break? Okay. It's 11:13. Let's just make it a 7-minute break. Let's come back at 11:20. Okay. Right. Before we start,
Jason. Yeah, I'm back, Jason, but I'm eating, so I'll be off camera.
enjoy.
Thank you.
Before we start, any questions or comments about the first half? Everything's good? Okay, cool. So let's jump back in. So again, all sentient beings are the ones that allow us to develop compassion. You cannot become a Buddha without compassion and wisdom of emptiness. So you can really, theoretically, you cannot, or actually functionally, you cannot become a Buddha without sentient beings, because sentient beings are the ones that are going to pull our card, for lack of better words, right? They're the ones that are going to do like abnormal, outlandish shit that makes us really mad. And we're going to want to be mad at them. But what we could do is say, look, the only way that I ascend as a human being to be more loving, more open, more accepting is by taking all the situations in the world that I don't like and looking at them as a unified army against my selfish desires. And if we can actually do that, we will experience a level of contentment that is sort of unexpected. I used another example for this point: toward all beings, contemplate their kindness. By the way, the backstory of this point, when you hear the words towards all beings, contemplate their kindness, you may just think like, okay, look at the kindness of all beings. It's a little deeper than that. There's a tinge of context where you're kind of looking at all beings, especially the ones that harm you or make you upset or cause issues. You're kind of looking at all of them and saying, let me contemplate their kindness. So this is especially to be done with those people or living beings that rub you the wrong way. Okay. So this one says, in return, whoops. This is yet another Lojong text called the 37 Practices of Bodhisattvas. It's a beautiful text. It's very, very popular across all the Tibetan traditions. And this master's name was Togme Zongpo, and he said, in return for not the slightest wrong of mine, someone were to cut off even my very head, through the power of compassion to take all his negative actions upon myself is the practice of a bodhisattva. Another way to say this is no matter what somebody does to me or others, no matter how much of an offender somebody seems to be, we can still have compassion for them. You know, I'm a big advocate for animals. So I'm on all the animal charities, and I especially love the refuge farms where they rescue farm animals and they rescue animals to save them from being slaughtered, and they rescue animals from other rescues who are not capable of caring for them. So I really love all these animals. And when I see somebody, like there was this video going around of a police officer abusing his police dog down in, I don't remember, it was somewhere in the South, like North Carolina or something. And I signed a petition to get him out. And when I see stuff like that, it breaks my heart. And it's really easy to have compassion for the animal being hurt, right? But what about the guy or the it's usually not a girl, but what about this? So I'll just say the guy. What about the guy that's doing the abusing? That's a sentient being, you know, and according to Buddhism, he's going to go and suffer in a very incomprehensible manner for doing stuff like this. And that we should not want a person to suffer, right? Just because somebody hurts another individual, we should not want them to suffer. So if we can learn how to have compassion for everybody equally, that is genuine, sincere compassion. So if you meet someone who really hurts you, we can look at them like a rare and precious treasure. So back to kind of what we were talking about before, it's so antithetical to American culture and the way that we've been taught that it's like, what? You get shocked. But if we can do this, it can really help us. So if we hold that person in high esteem and make full use of the opportunity to eradicate our defects and make progress on the path. If you cannot feel love and compassion for those who treat you badly, it's a sign that your mind has not been fully transformed and that you need to keep working on it with increased application. And this is exactly what nowadays, when I experience situations like what I talked about Thursday, this is really the feeling that I have is like, look, if I can't accept a situation, that's my problem, right? In the old days, I really just solely pointed the finger outward and felt like that. Now I won't share the words that might come up. That blank blank, you know. But nowadays, not so much. I mean, yeah, I might experience anger, but I know very intimately the problem's in here. The problem is my own psychological functioning. It's my wish to get everything I want and to get nothing that I don't want. Okay. This next one is called, what does that say? Voidness is, can somebody read that to me? Voidness is,
The unsurpassed protection.
okay. My Zoom thing won't let me move it. Okay. Voidness is the unsurpassed protection. I know how much you guys love emptiness. So this is more emptiness, but it's actually emptiness applied. So that's kind of cool. It's less like theoretical and it's more like, how do we apply it? Now, this is part of the problem that you're going to have as you guys continue to study Tibetan Buddhism. One of the problems you're going to have is there's always different translations of different things. So I like this translation more. And voidness being emptiness, it's the unsurpassed protection. Now, how does emptiness protect us? Here is a really beautiful paragraph that when I was first training, when I saw this, I was just like, man, this is just so powerful. So phenomena are not established primordially. What does that mean? It means that they don't exist from their own side, right? They're independent, they're dependent arisings. You guys know this. The human being arises in dependence upon causes and conditions, the sperm and the egg, right? Parts. The human has a head, eyes, nose, mouth, ears, hands, legs, fingers, hands, feet, toes. That's a human body, torso. So causes and conditions, parts, and then the mind that conceives and labels onto that person. So it's conceptual. So when they say phenomena are not established primordially, they're saying they're not established in the opposite of those three things I just gave you, CPN. Okay. So things are not independent. They exist as dependent originations. And so then he goes on to use this beautiful metaphor or analogy. He says, yet I remain bound. So like, imagine your hands are tied, right? I remain bound as though unable to undo knots made in the sky or strangled by a tortoise hair noose. So just imagine if I was like sitting here and I was like, please untie me. But they were imaginary ropes that had my hands tied. Please untie me. Well, you're not tied, Jason. What the hell are you talking about? Untie me. I'm scared. Dude, what are you talking about? My wrists are tied. Like your wrists are not tied. That's what he's talking about. Undo knots made in the sky. They're imaginary knots. Okay. And then imagining as if you're strangled by a tortoise hair noose. Tortoises don't have hair. Turtles don't have hair. Okay. So a sky knot is non-existent. I can't tie you up in, I can't tie you up with a sky knot. It just won't work. I won't be able to tie you up. And then nobody can be strangled with a tortoise hair noose because tortoises don't have hairs. Don't have hair, rather. Hairs. Good English, Chase. Don't have hair. There's another one where they use the example of a barren woman's daughter. And that might be, remember, these are 1,000-year-old things. So I don't know if I think that's okay. Essentially saying that a woman who cannot produce children doesn't have kids, right? So if you say a barren woman's daughter, it's a non-existent illusion, right? So that's what these are, is there are these ways to get you to kind of wake up and see like, oh, I'm producing all my problems. You think about that for a second. The biggest problem that anybody on this call is experiencing right now is like a knot made in the sky. And why do I say that? I say that because that problem doesn't exist anywhere but your mind. There might be something out there that's happening, but you can't call it a problem, right? So just if you can really let this sink into your mind for a moment, it's like you might have an epiphany. Like, oh, just the way that you can't tie a knot in the sky, this situation I'm dealing with cannot be a problem without me putting my own opinion on it and creating the problem. Does that make sense? You're muted, David, but I think you're saying yeah, right? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, and then he says, as such, my mind has arisen as a demon and chained by conceptualization, I remain enmeshed in suffering. I love these words. They're so like vivid. They evoke this visualization, like your mind's a demon. Whoa. But the truth is our minds are demons because they're creating infinite amount of suffering by telling us, your mind sees a situation and then tells you like, oh, it's horrible. My boss did this or my coworker. Or I mean, we're creating this stuff. Okay. And we're putting ourselves into conceptual prison. And then he says, all hopes and fears, such as fearing illness or harm from ghosts, or hoping to be cured of illnesses, as well as thoughts of negation and affirmation, meaning something I don't want or something I want, negation and affirmation, or saying, yes, this exists. No, it doesn't exist. So you take sickness and then you take thoughts of negation and affirmation in emptiness, place them all within the sphere of emptiness and release them with ultimate reality itself. So essentially to put this, I'm guessing this doesn't make total sense to you guys. Essentially, anything we are dealing with in our life where we have a position, a view, a position, an opinion, a preference, an expected outcome is we have created it. And when things don't go wrong, even though we like to point the finger out there and say, I'm so mad at such and such, or I'm so mad this or that happened. The truth of the matter is we are creating it just like a knot made in the sky. So it's like we're saying, I'm so tied up with all these problems. And by the way, guys, I do it too. I do it all the time. I'm an idiot because I know better, but yet I still do it. So I'm like saying, I'm so tied up. The situation's so bad. It's like, do this, break the chains, dude, because it's all in your mind. So on one hand, it's problematic that we create all these problems because they don't really exist. So it's like it's really sad. But then on the other hand, the beautiful thing is to break the chains of conceptual prison, all you have to do is break the handcuffs. Just do this. Pop. We're free. Okay? So again, all of our problems are mental illusions. That's essentially what they're saying. And it's true because the problems that we create, so that thing on Thursday, I was I was imputing all kinds of concepts on the situation that was occurring when I was on that phone call, Zoom call. By the way, can you say phone call anymore if you're doing Zoom, or is that like totally outdated? Pretty sure it's outdated. I like to be old school. 42. 42 years strong, baby. So anyway, yeah, we're creating these things, right? So situations happen and they're just experiences that we're aware of without us making them good or bad. They're just there. They're like a wave on the ocean, right? Nobody looks at a wave on the ocean and starts crying. Oh, that wave, like, it didn't even thank me. I went and swam in it and he didn't even thank me. Dude, it's just a wave. The wave's not going to thank you for swimming in it. It's just let it be what it is. And that's kind of what we need to learn how to do. We need to let it be. We need to let life unfold. Just rest and let it unfold and understand that we're the orchestra, the person, I forget what they're called, the one that does this, conductor or whatever. We're the conductor and we're creating the whole mess. But we're doing this. Yo, it's your problem. You did this to me. You made me think this way. Nope, not even for a second. It's us. It's just we've never been taught this. So when you're seeing this, you're like, it's a new way to think. Any questions? Sickness and other sufferings engendered true renunciation in me. For without suffering, there can be no true renunciation. Since they definitely help dispel the afflictions of my mind, they help me realize the teaching's intent. So they are most kind indeed. So did anybody show up to Tibetan Buddhism because their life was perfect? Not me. Did anybody show up because they were experiencing some kind of pain, whether it was big, small, or medium? Right? So that's why I showed up. And quite honestly, that's why I'm here 7, 8 years later, is because I know beyond the shadow of a doubt that this is about the only thing. In my mind, Buddhism is almost a panacea that's capable of relieving all my suffering. And there's not a lot of things I would say that about. In fact, there's nothing I'd say that about. But here we're talking about sickness and suffering. So most people, when they experience sickness or suffering or life going the wrong way, they get really depressed and they get really upset about it, right? But here's the thing: if you are trained in the Dharma, sickness and suffering are going to help you turn towards the Dharma. You're going to see it as a life raft, and you're going to turn towards it. So it can help you to focus your limited time as a human on meaningful things like Dharma practice. Okay. Then he says, for it is stated with disenchantment, arrogance is dispelled. Furthermore, suffering brings forth compassion, which is the root of the great vehicle, for it is stated. Here's another thing. When you really suffer, it does cause compassion in you, because anybody that's suffering with what you're suffering with, you start to think like, wow, there's a lot of people suffering with the same thing I am. Right? So towards samsaric beings generate compassion. So here's another series of really cool kind of visual depictions of us making a mess of our lives. By the way, this is Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. He's one of the really popular masters. He's passed on. I think he passed away in the 90s, but he has several really good books. And if you're after, if you guys are looking for good books, this one here is probably one of the best books I've ever read on Buddhism. It's absolutely profound. And he says he makes a bunch of comparisons to an angry thought, right? He says, is the angry thought holding a weapon in its hand? The reason I really love this is because it's one part comical and it's the other part eye-opening, right? Because when we get mad, we really think the anger's there. We think the anger's really there and we're really pissed off and we're ready to go to battle, whether it's a conversation or worse, depending on the person. So that anger in your mind, is it holding a weapon? Can anger hold a weapon? I mean, I think the answer is no, right? So is it holding a weapon in its hand? Could it lead an army? So could the thought in your mind lead an army? No, it's just a thought, right? Might it burn anyone like a fire? No, it can't burn anyone like a fire. Might it crush them like a stone? No, anger cannot crush people like a stone. It's basically chemicals and thoughts. Okay. Could it carry them away like a raging river? No. So he does all these things. It's like this, it's like 10 different ways to get us to see that this is just a thought. It's just a thought arising in our mind. It can't hold a weapon. It can't lead an army. It can't burn somebody like a fire. It can't crush them like a stone. It can't carry them away like a raging river. And the reason for that is because it's an invisible thought. We know it's there, but yet the minute you look right at a thought, it disappears. It can't withstand the power of your awareness. So don't take it so seriously. It's just a thought. Another thing he talks about is the five poisons are empty by nature. So again, kind of like the same as the last slide. Empty by nature, meaning a thought is a invisible phenomenon that arises, that we know it's there, but then the second you look at it, it's already gone because it's impermanent. So understanding the thoughts are empty, we should watch from where do they arise? What does the agent of these arisings look like? So we are the agent of our thoughts. So from where did the thoughts arise? What does the agent of the arisings look like? And what do the emotions themselves look like? If we analyze, we shall find nothing. This absence is the unborn Dharmakaya. So the point is, there's a very skillful way to deal with negative emotions. The minute a negative emotion arises, look directly at it. If you can look directly at your negative emotion and try to analyze, where did it come from? Who is the thinker of or the feeler of this emotion? And what does the emotion actually look like? You'll come to the conclusion that there's nothing there. Because if anger arises and you concentrate and look directly at it, you won't be able to see it. Because that's how the mind works. The only way that you can feel a thought or see a thought is when you sort of give it control. And the only way that a thought can have control over you or an emotion can have control over you is when your unanalytic mind is glossed over by ignorance. But if you have anger and you look directly at it, it will run away like a scared puppy. It just won't, it can't stay there. Okay. Does this make sense, guys? Any questions? So basically anything negative that arises in your mind, look directly at it. Any questions? This is from the book you guys are studying. So the three views are like the protection. I can't see that, but you can read it. There's three views: happiness, purity, or happiness, gratitude, and purity. These are really pithy, skillful ways for us to deal with situations that arise. So happiness. Adversities that may at first seem harmful are in fact the complete opposite. They're extremely helpful. Obstacles and disturbances are actually reminders to you that you have not perfected the two bodhicittas. Be happy that you now have a clear reminder to work on your bodhicitta. So in other words, the two bodhicittas being, love and compassion is one of them, and then emptiness is the other. So if an adversity arises, it means that we're not seeing it clearly. I'm sorry, if an adversity arises and we get pulled away by it, if we get mad or we end up sad or upset, it means that we have not used our critical analyzing mind to as an antidote to it. Okay. So it's like a reminder. It's like a dashboard alert, like low oil, low oil. In this case, it's a dashboard alert, low bodhicitta, low loving compassion, low emptiness, right? So when adversities come, you can be happy, you can be grateful. So you could understand that adversities warn us not to be too relaxed to let our precious human life be taken for granted. We should use this precious human life for the ultimate goal of awakening and not waste time on other things. If we misuse this opportunity now, we may fall into darkness for eons. In this way, adversities are as kind to us as parents. Therefore, you may go so far as to feel love for adversities, for they prevent you from misusing your precious life. So he's coming at this from the perspective of reincarnation. The Buddhists teach us that reincarnation is extremely rare as a human. The likelihood of being a human is like 1 over infinity. I mean, it's very, very rare. So if we have adversities arising and we're having a hard time with them, maybe compare them to being burnt alive in the hells and then passing out and then waking back up because you have a body that actually cannot die. Okay. So the whole gratitude thing is about waking up to the fact that we should be using our human life for something more meaningful. Okay. So if things are arising and you're suffering, maybe you're sick or maybe life isn't going the way you want, you can look at this and say, oh, this is a reminder that my next reincarnations could be much, much worse. So I need to use my human life to ascend spiritually and to gain wisdom and compassion. Make sense? And then purity. I really like this one. Think about how, as a result of every obstacle and harm in your life, you can develop the greatest results from meditation. This type of harm is therefore not harmful at all. It is rather full of remarkable qualities, like a very bitter medicine that will completely cure your sickness. It is therefore completely pure as the most effective medicine. Kind of like where my mind goes here is like when you take antibiotics, sometimes it kind of makes you feel weird, like your stomach hurts or your body feels off, but at the same time, it's removing the infection inside of you. So when we experience adversities, you can think of it like an antibiotic for our selfishness, right? Because yeah, you're really hurt by what happened, right? But at the same time, it can purify your ego. You can use it. Remember what I said before is you can use this. You can take this situation and look at it as the army, as your compatriot against the enemy of selfishness. Make sense? So these are three that I spent a lot of time memorizing: HPG, happiness, purity, gratitude. I really like those things. The explanations. Any questions, guys? So I don't want to start on the next point because whoops. I don't want to start on the next point because we don't really have enough time. We only have 12 minutes. But I think this is a good opportunity to chat and do some Q&A.
Well, can say that the last couple days I've been kind of thinking a lot about how one of the managers at work does things. She she's always helps people out, and like if sometimes we get stuck somewhere and have to land the helicopter for bad weather, and she'll stop whatever she's doing, drive out, pick us up, bring us back, and even in the middle of a snowstorm, and then just the way she's always taking care of all of our needs. It's almost it makes you feel like a millionaire with a butler. It makes you feel very important, you know and I kind of look up to that. That's what I'd like to do for other people. So I kind of look at her as a role model when I think of you know how you can put other people above you.
Beautiful. And how does she make you feel?
Just like I'm important.
Oh, yeah. And she makes everybody feel that way, right?
Yep.
Yeah. It's very powerful.
Mhm. But she's not a good teacher of killing the ego, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Oh, because she's helping your ego.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why you have to look at it like you said, right? Like look at it as I want to be like her.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. That's great. Thomas, David, and Jason. I don't think we've heard from Jason. What do you think, Jason?
Let me think. Yeah, I have difficulty killing the ego. I still think it's that phrase, think of yourself as the lowest of the lowly, versus on my training. Like, I feel like that. And maybe that's the way you're supposed to feel, but like it enhances my happiness, which maybe it's a good thing. I don't know, but it feels like it's no, I don't know. But yeah.
Good haircut, Jace. Thomas and David.
I'm making room for Thomas here.
Lots to digest today. I guess I kind of have a very off-topic question. Earlier, you were talking about, I don't remember his name, but I'm assuming he was a Rinpoche of some sort that recently passed away.
Yeah.
And you said like we should wish for like a positive rebirth for him. How do we know that somebody of that level didn't attain enlightenment?
Great point. The Tibetan masters, when they pass away, they always use this term parinirvana, which is to suggest that they have passed away into some kind of enlightenment. I suppose we don't really know, where they're going. So they still do pujas for them. So they do prayer ceremonies and all that kind of stuff. So the goal is basically just having really warm wishes for them to, you know, wherever they end up, to be very beneficial and to continue to be able to teach people. That's kind of the way I look at it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's a great question. And what do you think about the teachings? Any comments on any of the points?
I mean, I wish I had a great insight or softer question or something. I really don't
All
right
good.
now.
Yeah, totally cool. Thanks, Thomas. Anything from you, David? Are you good?
Well, I'm glad you asked. No, I'm just kidding. I'm in agreement with Thomas what he said last week because I did go back and watch the video. These topics are maybe easier to digest than when we were discussing ultimate truth, which is a lot more abstract. This seems a lot easier to understand. So I find myself without a ton of questions and more just mulling over, okay, how and when am I going to apply this? And how far am I going to take this? You know, how much do I do what others want me to do to avoid being selfish? And so that's kind of where I'm at, is how do I apply this? How far will I take it? But not so much maybe what does it all mean? Because the value, I mean, I see the value there. There are very logical connections in the value between behave this way and your mind will become this, which is a better state of mind. I'm on board with that.
It's great, man. I like that you're thinking about how to apply it. I think that's really that's a very useful exercise for all of us.
The meditation is slowly starting to leak into my non-sitting life, which I'm liking, where I'm starting to find myself throughout the days, little moments where I'm going, I'm not thinking about what I'm doing. I'm reflexively acting, or I'm doing a thing. Do I really want to do it? Let's stop. And so things are starting to leak out into the normal life, as it were.
It's fantastic. That's the goal. I always felt like one of the biggest, one of the things that makes me the saddest about all of this is that we've been given these teachings, and the thought of leaving them on the shelf, that kills me, because they can really help us. They're like medicine for us. And but of course, like anything worthwhile, they only help us to the degree we invest in them. So that's great. Well, thanks guys for talking and kind of sharing your feelings. Any other questions before we do the dedication prayers?
Do you know if, or like how children are taught, or if this is able to be taught to children?
Can I ask why you're asking? Do you know of somebody, or what are you?
Oh, it's just something I've been, pondering over. I have a lot of friends who are teachers. So, over the years, we've talked about the education system. And then this just seems like good life, like good tools for resilience in life, and something that would be good to learn at an earlier age.
Yeah. If I had $1 for every time I thought about, if only I, if only I would have known some of this stuff as a kid, how much less suffering I would have had. I mean, I don't know if anybody else has connected those dots as we've been going through all this, but
I know as a kid, I didn't feel like I had a lot of tools to deal with some of the stuff in life.
me too. Yeah. 100%. And then that made me gravitate towards bad tools
Yeah.
that you drink. So I'm 100% with you. I know that the Dalai Lama has like a vision for what he calls, forget the term, like non-religious, sectarian ethics is what he calls it. And it's basically just love, compassion, patience, tolerance, stuff like that. Basically what we're learning here. And he's always had this vision of like this should be taught in schools, right? And when I think back to my education, K through 12 or whatever, there was nothing about love and compassion in those classes. There was science, math, reading, English, all those things, athletics or gym or whatever you call it. But there was a huge gap of any sort of teachings on emotional intelligence, mental wellness, mental health, pragmatic ways to deal with life. So yeah, I mean, you pose a really good question. I know that mindfulness is starting to make its way into schools. So there's a lot, not a lot, but there are more and more of these schools that are actually implementing mindfulness.
Oh, are
And
they?
yeah, it's really beautiful. It's probably not real big here in the old Indiana yet. Our state's a little red, but it's growing and there's a lot of momentum. And there's like if you like Google mindfulness in schools, you'll see there's documentaries, there's all kinds of stuff. And a lot of schools, like there have been several what you would call quote unquote low income schools or inner city, financially challenged schools. And they take this mindfulness into the school and they have all kinds of positive benefits like the number of fights is reduced, the number of like the test scores increase, and they replace detention with mindfulness. And so, yeah, I mean, I know that's different than what we're studying here, but I think it's kind of a entry into some of this stuff.
Yeah, it's good to hear that there is some of that going on.
Yeah, it's really positive, and I hope that it keeps growing because I think if everybody was taught some of this kind of stuff, like you said earlier, it would be a different world. Because I want my neighbor to bring me warm brownies and wash my cars. I mean, that's what I want. Last week I was talking about that. I was like, just imagine, right? Imagine everybody in your neighborhood or your apartment or all your neighbors are like coming over and they're like, let's have coffee together. Please, what can I help you with? No, no, no. I'm washing your car and I'm using your favorite wax. No, I won't take no for an answer. Like, what if everybody was like that? What would this whole thing be like? I mean, it's almost unfathomable, isn't it? Like, you really can't imagine that type of a world.
I mean, if you're offering, Jason, you can come over and wash my car if you want.
Text me your address, bro.
We'll see how far this game of chicken goes.
If you put the materials out there, I'll come clean. I'll come wash the car.
So, somewhat unrelated, but related on the education front. Not that I'm teaching K to 12, but I've been focusing on the connections between meditation and mindfulness and cognitive behavioral therapy and how one can apply this to test taking, because that's something that's very much in my world is how do people with test anxiety go take tests when they have crippling anxieties. And so I've been noodling around and taking notes about how one combines some of these methodologies into a sort of secular, non-religious package, but still gets the idea across. And definitely been playing with that exercise of thinking of the number 5 that you gave us and kind of figuring out how do you present that in a secular way where people still get the value. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great, man. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but the way that I've been going through this is mostly secular. The pictures might make you feel like it's not that way because there's Buddhas everywhere, but I've stripped out some of the stuff that is normally here. Like, for example, there's something called guru yoga. And what guru yoga is you visualize your guru above your head and you say, and this is the entry into mind training. So when you do mind training, you're supposed to do this. And by the way, I can teach you guys if you want to know, but I'm giving this as an example because there's some things that Westerners are kind of like at first, kind of like they do this. So as teachers of Buddhism, we have to be careful about when we introduce certain things. But anyway, Guru yoga is creating devotion for the guru. What you do is you visualize the guru above your head, like sitting facing forward, and you just say, Guru, genuine, perfect, great spiritual friend. I pray that you bless me. I pray that you cause extraordinary love, compassion, and bodhicitta to arise within me. And you do that, you do a whole mala of that. That's 108 beads. So I haven't, there have been certain things that I haven't introduced because when somebody's brand new to the Dharma, especially if they're coming from another monotheistic religion, they might not love that idea of devotion. So, yeah, So there's some stuff like that that we kind of haven't gotten into. So I would say that a lot of this stuff is secular. And, a lot of these Tibetan masters tell people like, if you come to my class and you're Christian, totally cool. You can continue to be a Christian and you can use these things, right? So I do think that this is all equally beneficial for every religion. The problem does arise when you talk about emptiness, because if you believe in a single creator, then that kind of puts dependent origination. That creates a problem with dependent origination. So emptiness and a single higher power or a single God don't really play well together. But I still, I look at it a little differently. I look at it like, I actually I read books written by Franciscan priests, and what's that other one? Not Franciscan, but there's another one, the Jesuits. So you guys would not expect me to do this, but I read a lot of books from those types because a lot of them have a very deep spirituality, And so the way that I reconcile the gap between believing in a single God and then believing in emptiness is I just say, look, in my mind, if they believe in a God and I don't, if there was a God, would humans really know what it even is? No. The answer to me is no. So then I can hang out with them without having this big wall up. You know what I mean? And I just embrace that the terminology is different and I'm cool with that. So anyway, kind of I digressed.
So you're saying there are teachings that you have not presented to us, meaning in a sense they are secret, sort of secret teachings that you have not revealed to us. Would you say that's accurate?
They're not secret. Yeah, they're not secret. They're
This is
typically,
it's a bit of a running joke. We've been hypothesizing that there are secret teachings because in the book we've been reading, there is some reference to there being key teachings or unspoken teachings that are not revealed. So we've been hypothesizing that you've got some secret teachings that you're hiding from us.
do you see all these Buddhas on the wall?
Let
So,
down.
so the Tibetan Buddhism is, you have sutra and you have tantra. The tantra is called the secret mantrayana or the secret tantrayana or the secret vajrayana. It is secret, but but the reason it's secret and the reason most Westerners think it's secret are two different things. The reason it's secret is because it's difficult to realize. So, but in order to practice the mantras and so forth, you're supposed to have an empowerment. It's supposed to be given by what's called a Vajra master. So that book you're talking about is probably talking about that.
Yeah.
My reason for not going really deep into like guru yoga is more of a pragmatic reason. I already experienced enough. What's the right word? I experience enough obstacles in the Western mind when teaching this stuff. Whereas if I say, hey, I know you've never been to a class of Buddhism, but I want you to do guru yoga. And then that means they would have to visualize me. And I don't really want them doing that. So the whole thing is like, it's
So are you hosting secret classes or not? That's what we want to know. Do you have a secret class schedule?
no, no,
Do you have Thursday morning classes that we don't know about yet that we're going to get invited to someday?
no.
Okay, that's too bad because that would have been kind of cool.
But we can do a class anytime you guys want. We can
Not Thursday morning.
and we can label it a secret class. That makes it fun. I'll print out certificates. Such and such graduated the secret, Jason's secret Buddhist class.
Yes, please.
Let's do it, man. I'm in.
Yes, please. There we have it. There are secret teachings, but no secret classes.
So the way Buddhists look at emptiness as actually this whole thing that we're doing in the old days, This would never have been given to beginners, because Lojong it's precipitated by, or it comes after, right? Lam Rim teachings. And Lam Rim Lam Rim means graduated path. So it means you start at the very beginning of Buddhism, and then you do this, right? And you go up, and it's supposed to take you all the way through enlightenment. So these teachings are Lojong, and they're supposed to be like, and I'm talking 1,000 years ago, they were given after Lam Rim. So if you guys think back to the very beginning classes we did together, where I went over what are called the preliminaries, which were precious human rebirth, impermanence and death, karma, and then samsara. If you guys remember those preliminaries, somebody's supposed to sort of do those before they come into this. So what I did was I just merged them. So a lot of the secret stuff is about somebody's capacity. It's about what they've learned. It's like, okay, use me as an example. You do math, right? You teach math. So when I was young, when I got out of the Marines, I had like half of a bachelor's because I did community college. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to get a business degree. Right. And I went to an algebra class, and I'm not good at algebra. And this guy was not good at teaching.
Mm.
So then I decided, I was like, I'm going to change my major. And I literally changed my major because the thought of having to deal with all that math was so bad. So in Buddhism, there's kind of a commensurate thought process that if you could take a beginner and try to teach them emptiness, you could do more harm than good, because you might have people, first of all, everybody's going to get confused as hell. Second of all, they're going to be like, well, nothing matters now, so I'm going to go jump rope out in the traffic. So part of the whole secret thing is about that, is about, does somebody have the foundation to be learning what you're teaching? I don't know if that makes sense, but I know secret sounds funny to us as Westerners, but it's kind of about that.
I think of secret in the sort of Scientology sense, where
Oh,
they apparently have tiers that you elevate up until they reveal some like big truths to you about aliens and stuff. And
yeah. No, we don't have any aliens going on.
that's
And there's
good too.
and there's no hidden truth on Thursday mornings. In fact, I literally gave you guys way too deep of teachings in the very beginning. If you want to know the real solid truth, like a new person who learned Buddhism like 3 weeks ago, to learn the depths of emptiness. I mean, a lot of that stuff, y- you're going to be having ahas in 3 years from now, hopefully, about.
Mm.
And I'm 7 years in, and I'm still, when I think about emptiness, sometimes I still have aha moments. So
Mm.
it's more about is the student that's learning this prepared for the level of complexity included in some of the teachings. So yeah, cool. Anything else, guys? Any other questions about the teachings? I mean, I realize the whole crush the ego is antithetical to what most of us are doing on a daily basis. So I'm always curious if people can see themselves actually doing it. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. And may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. In the land encircled by snow white mountains, the source of all happiness and benefit flows in your person. Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Just as the Bodhisattva Manjushri and Samantabhadra too praise dedication as supreme, so now I too dedicate these sources of my merit for all to train and follow in their footsteps. All the victorious Buddhas of the past, present, and future praise dedication as supreme, So now I too dedicate these sources of my merit for all beings to perfect good actions. Just a reminder, when we dedicate, we're just saying all the good stuff I've ever done, especially during this class, I give it away. So it's just a very intelligent and pragmatic way to continue to, this whole thing is about suffocating the selfishness inside of our minds. So it seems esoteric when you see it, when you hear it, but it's more like crush my ego, crush my ego, crush my ego. It's really what it's about. So anything else, guys, before we shut this bad boy down? Nothing else. Okay. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you all joining.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
Yep. You too.
Take care, guys. Bye.